Okay, we need to address the elephant in the room. We need to talk about the risk. Riding a motorcycle is dangerous. But is it too dangerous? Well, I couldn't think of a better place to have that conversation than here, on the notorious Tizi Pass, nestled deep in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. I was midway through a 47-day solo motorcycle adventure that had taken me from my home in London, across France, along the coast of Spain, and right down into North Africa. And by the time I'd meandered my way back home, I'd put in over 4,000 miles on my... But not before I witnessed something here on the pass that gave me pause to reflect on my own relationship with risk. The Midlife Rider's Notebook. Part 1. Risk. The Tizi Pass. The book describes the route, first established in 1936 as a remarkable feat of engineering, cutting through the Atlas Mountains and connecting the cities of Downs to Marrakesh. Challenging, features steep, twisty roads and uneven surfaces, several hairpin turns often narrowly bordered by jagged cliff edges that descend several hundred feet, perhaps unsuitable for the less experienced rider or those uncomfortable with heights. So that morning, I enjoyed a delicious breakfast. The requisite cup of coffee. I loaded up the T7, waved goodbye to the dog, and to Mark, the owner of the riad, who kindly filmed me setting off. Now, I should probably mention at this point that I'd only been riding for less than a year. And to be fair, suffer from more than a small amount of vertigo. So as I approached the pass, I felt more than a little out of my depth. A feeling not alleviated by the numerous trucks and construction vehicles that I passed. Which brings us back to the question of risk, and if motorcycles are too dangerous. Compared to what? When you think about it, every action we take carries some degree of risk. So the only way that we can really quantify that risk is by comparing it to other activities. Anything else is completely subjective, personal, and based on our own perceptions.
Ok, ça va? Ok. Comment bien?
Merci. C'est ok?
Ah ouais, c'est bon. Ça va.
So if we were to compare riding a motorcycle with, say, flying on a commercial airliner, we could conclude that riding a motorcycle is mind-bogglingly dangerous. In spite of our perception of the risks, being on a commercial airliner is about the safest thing that one can do, next to arguably sitting on their sofa.
Yeah, I'm going to be here for a little while. We'll be sitting tight here for a little while. Oh, they just clear up that little business.
However, if we were to compare riding a motorcycle with, say, the act of base jumping, we could deduce that riding a motorcycle is reassuringly very safe indeed.
Nicely done.
Okay, fair enough. You could argue that it isn't a fair comparison. Surely we should be evaluating the risks associated with traveling on a motorcycle with those of traveling inside a car. Or more accurately, because each of these activities is equally safe, how dangerous is the act of crashing a motorcycle compared with crashing a car? And here, I'm afraid to say the truth is that crashing a motorcycle is way, way more dangerous than crashing a car. But then, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we probably knew that already. And this highlights a problem with basing our decisions about risk on simple comparison. So how do we judge the risk of our decisions? Well, it turns out as humans, we're not all that good at it. We're plagued by cognitive bias. For example, we often wildly overestimate certain dangers if we see them as more dramatic, like our chances of being attacked by a shark, while at the same time, we may tend to downplay more mundane threats, like heart disease or the risks associated with alcohol. In business, they developed some strategies to try and assess the risks of any given activity. It may be very true that one thing both riding a motorcycle and flying on a commercial airliner have in common is that they are both very unpleasant places to be in the event of a sudden and unexpected intersection with the Earth. It's just that in one of the cases, it's far less likely to happen. So by plotting out any activity in this way, we can assign an overall risk value to it and decide whether that value falls within our own risk tolerance levels. But this is where things get tricky, because risk tolerance varies greatly from person to person, and it's far from immutable. For example, while it may be true statistically that young people may have a higher appetite for risk than older people, and women are slightly more risk-averse than men, it is not constant. Factors like having dependence or feeling a degree of agency or security or even desperation can all massively affect our risk tolerance levels. And while it may be true that some people are just simply more or less risk-averse than others, arguably the biggest factor in determining one's risk tolerance to any given activity is the rewards that they associate with it, whether they be wealth, resources, fame, survival, or the exhilarating sense of freedom garnered by riding the open roads. Now, some people would argue the greater the risk, the greater the rewards. But of course, this isn't always true. One could easily stumble upon a 100-pound note on the ground simply by walking down the streets. But I would argue that we do tend to assign a higher value to those possessions, experiences, or achievements that we have acquired in life by taking some degree of risk. Which brings me here, to the highest point of the Tizi Test Pass, the summit, so to speak. I've apparently made it through the most harrowing sections of the ride. So I stop in at the cafe, where I'm rewarded by some biscuits, home-baked by the proprietor's mother. I grab a selfie and check out the signs plastered with stickers from all the past adventure tours that have crossed through the pass over the years. And so, with the most difficult part behind me, I began the slightly more relaxing ride down towards my next accommodation.
I keep on trying to make progress, and there's just too much opportunity for photograph. Hello, donkey.
The final challenge for the day was to negotiate my motorcycle up through the windy passage towards my riad. My biggest concern at this stage being not to drop the bike into the swimming pool. But I didn't, and the day had passed largely without incident. Well, that isn't entirely true. When I said I saw something along the pass that made me reconsider my relationship with risk, it was not actually a crash, or even a near miss. I'm sorry if I was a bit misleading on that. What I didn't mention, and the reason for all of the trucks and construction work, was that in 2023, this entire region was hit by a devastating earthquake. It measured 6.9 on the Richter scale, and it brought with it billions of dollars worth of damage, and nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. Many more saw their homes reduced to rubble. The rebuilding work continues at a pace, but the evidence of the quake still remains, with tent villages dotted throughout the region. And then there was this, which stopped me in my tracks. A makeshift mosque fashioned out of offcuts of wood and tarpaulin. A beautiful testament, I thought, to the human spirits and sense of community in the face of adversity. But also a stark reminder that in spite of all of our attempts to surround ourselves with safety and comfort, to provide a thoroughly risk-free environment for ourselves or our loved ones, that the reality is that life is risk. It's fundamentally fragile and fraught, even if we do everything to avoid danger. I worry that we have become obsessed in our modern world with the idea of personal safety. We've come to believe that any form of risk or danger or accident or mishap represents some form of moral failure. We seek to litigate against anyone or anything we feel is responsible for bad things happening. But I think we do so at the expense of our own moral spirit, because a fundamental aspect of human nature is the continual interplay between risk and rewards. It is literally what makes us human. arguably, these days, some of the biggest risks we face are found right next to the sofa. The remote control, our addiction to these electronic devices that push us further away from experiencing real life. The greatest risk, though, I think, for me personally, is that at this stage in my life, I will come to the end of it without having at least tried to do some of those things that I'd always dreamed of doing, like dipping my toes in the sands of the Sahara, or racing along on a motorcycle across the wide open roads of Morocco.